As someone who's been a fan of The Last of Us, and this was the game that got me into gaming, being able to see so many people experience this narrative for the first time is absolutely fantastic. And I don't know if enjoy, but being compelled by this narrative. I also love the content that's being created for it. The one thing I haven't heard yet when it comes to the discourse around The Last of Us, especially the first episode, is a breakdown of what exactly the music in the show means and what is the narrative behind it and what are the creators trying to say. Because if you listen to the companion podcast, Neil Druckmann, Craig Mazin, and Troy Baker all kind of harp on the fact that these two creators really value the music that's going into this episode and that there is a deeper meaning behind a lot of it. Spoilers for episode 1 of The Last of Us. So in the first part of the episode, what would have been the video game's prologue, there were 2 songs featured that really kind of set the stage of it being the early 2000s. So while Sarah's cooking birthday breakfast for Joel, the song Tomorrow by Avril Lavigne is playing. And when you look further into that song, it's basically a story about someone comforting someone else, about a hardship they're going through, and the person receiving the advice not really believing it, but hoping that they will feel better, maybe not today, but hopefully tomorrow. This shows Joel's overall character arc that he's about to go through when he experiences a loss no parent ever wants to go through. And after that, he closes himself off from all emotion so that way he doesn't have to experience a loss like that again. This story is going to show his metaphorical tomorrow, 20 plus years later when he crosses paths with Ellie and goes on this cross-country adventure with her. Next, when Joel and Sarah are eating breakfast together, the song White Flag is playing over the radio by Dido. And this was written about the singer's relationship falling apart because she spoke her mind to her partner about her feelings. And she realizes that if this person ever were to cross paths with her again, they really would not even acknowledge her existence or her presence due to the actions that she took. And regardless of that fact, she's still in love with that person. Focusing in on Joel specifically, he does feel a lot of guilt, thinking that he didn't do enough to protect Sarah, and it's already shown itself at the end of episode 1 when he faces down the Fedra guard with Ellie. This is going to be one of his main internal drivers on his journey with Ellie across the country and throughout the season. Gamers who have already experienced The Last of Us Part 1 and 2 know that Joel and Ellie are going to encounter tons of people who have experienced similar loss to them, whether that's a child, a parent, brother, sister, friend. And loss and guilt and atonement are going to show themselves differently in all these different people. Finally, the most viral song from the show is Never Let Me Down by Depeche Mode that they play when they're walking into kind of dilapidated Boston. And luckily, we don't have to speculate too much on what the song means in the context of the show. Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin discuss its meaning with Troy Baker on this week's episode of the Last of Us Recap podcast.
A lot of 80s music is chipper and fun, but Never Let Me Down Again, what I was looking for was an 80s song that felt, at least initially, like, oh, it's an up-tempo 80s song, but lyrically had a darkness to it.
Yeah.
And what it's about is I'm taking a ride with my best friend. Now, what he was singing about was drugs.
Right.
It was a song about addiction. Well, Ellie's about to take a ride with her best friend. And Joel is a dangerous man. And Joel is about to take a ride with his best friend. He doesn't know she's his best friend yet. And she's a dangerous little girl. And the whole point is, you're never going to let me down. Now, they are going to let each other down. And then they're not. And then they are, and then they're not. And that I thought was a really interesting way in. We are going to hear that song again. I won't tell you when or how, but it will be in a very different way and in a very different context.
It's been exciting to see how music is really getting incorporated in the story The Last of Us. And unfortunately, I think we're going to experience a lot of 80s music, and we're going to be able to dive in and really appreciate what the storytellers are trying to convey through these commercial songs.